My name is Daniel Morgan, and this is the story I've never told anyone. I call it, I was mowing his lawn when he asked me, "Are you single right now?" It was a warm June morning, the kind that makes the air shimmer over the pavement. I had been mowing lawns all summer to make extra cash after leaving my corporate job. It was supposed to be a temporary break, but that break had stretched into almost a year. I pulled my cap lower over my eyes as the mower sputtered to life again. The house belonged to Mr. Henderson, an older widower in his late 60s, who lived alone in a beautiful colonial-style home at the edge of town. I had been cutting his lawn for months now, and usually we'd exchange a polite wave, maybe some small talk about the weather. Nothing more. But that day was different. I was halfway through trimming the hedges when I felt someone watching me. I turned, expecting to see Mr. Henderson on his porch with his usual mug of coffee. Instead, a man stood there, mid-30s, tall, sharp-featured, with dark hair and eyes that seemed like they could read you before you even spoke. He wore a white button-down shirt rolled at the sleeves and held a set of car keys loosely in one hand. "Hey," he called out, walking toward me. "You're doing a good job on this lawn." I shut off the mower. "Thanks. Just about done with the back, too." He smiled faintly, though there was something intense about it. "Are you single right now?" The question came out of nowhere, blunt and heavy, like he had just dropped a stone into a still pond. I froze. The world seemed to go silent except for the faint buzz of a bee somewhere near the hedge. Yeah," I said, unsure why I even answered honestly. He nodded slightly, almost like that was the response he expected. "Good. I'm Adrian." Before I could say anything else, Mr. Henderson appeared on the porch. "Danny, you've met my nephew, I see," he said with a grin. "He's visiting for a few weeks." Adrian turned toward his uncle, then back to me. "Danny," he repeated, like he was testing how my name felt in his mouth. Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. I didn't think much of it then, just a strange question from a stranger. But later that evening, as I was packing up my tools, Adrian came outside again. "You always mow lawns?" he asked, leaning casually against the porch rail. "No," I admitted. "Used to work in marketing. Needed a change? Or maybe I just needed air." He tilted his head, studying me. "Air. That's a good reason." We talked for a while, longer than I expected. He told me he lived in New York, worked in some high-end art gallery, and was taking a break from all the noise. When I got into my truck to leave, he said, "See you around, Danny," like it was a promise. The next week, he was outside every time I came. Sometimes he'd bring me lemonade. Sometimes he'd just sit on the porch and watch me work, asking me odd, almost intrusive questions. "What's your favorite memory? If you could leave tomorrow, where would you go? Have you ever been in love?" The questions didn't feel like small talk. They felt like excavation, like he was digging for something under my skin. And against my better judgment, I found myself answering. One day, after I'd finished trimming the hedges, he walked over, close enough that I could see the faint scar running across his jawline. "You've got these eyes," he said quietly. "Like you're looking for something, but you don't know what it is." I didn't know how to respond. Before I could, Mr. Henderson came outside, cheerful as ever, and Adrian's expression shifted, like he'd just remembered we weren't alone. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about him, about that question he asked the first time we met, about the way he looked at me, like he saw something even I couldn't name. But there was something else too, something unsettling. I remembered how, when we were talking about love, he had gone quiet for a moment, almost pained, before saying softly, "Love ruins people, Danny, but sometimes it's worth being ruined for." I didn't know what he meant then. I didn't know how true it would turn out to be. I started to notice the little things first. Adrian would always be outside before I even pulled up, like he had been waiting. Sometimes he'd offer me coffee in the mornings, sometimes a cold beer when I finished. At first, it felt harmless, friendly even, but there was this edge to him, a sharpness that made me feel like I was being drawn into something I couldn't quite name. One Thursday, he waved me over after I'd parked my truck. "Come sit for a bit," he said, gesturing to the porch swing. "I should start the mower before it rains," I replied, glancing at the dark clouds overhead. "The lawn can wait," he said with a half smile. "I can't." The words caught me off guard. I sat down. He studied me, his fingers tapping lightly against his coffee mug. "You ever wonder why some people show up in your life exactly when you don't expect them?" "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I don't think too hard about it." "You should," he murmured, "because sometimes it's not coincidence. It's design." I didn't know if he was being poetic or if he meant something else entirely. After that day, I found myself thinking about Adrian more than I should have. He was magnetic, smart, disarming, with a way of making even silence feel charged. But there was another side to him, too. Once, I stopped by on a Sunday evening, just to drop off an invoice. Adrian opened the door. His shirt was rumpled, his hair messy, and his eyes, usually so sharp, looked raw, almost haunted. "Everything okay?" I asked carefully. He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You shouldn't ask questions you don't want the answers to, Danny." Something about the way he said it sent a chill through me. A few days later, my sister Emily came over for dinner. She noticed immediately that something was different. "You've been distracted," she said, twirling pasta on her fork. "You keep checking your phone like you're waiting for someone to text." I almost told her about Adrian, but stopped. How could I explain it? How could I explain the strange, unspoken pull between me and this man I barely knew? Instead, I just said, "It's nothing." The next week, Adrian invited me inside for the first time. "Uncle's gone to visit a friend," he said casually, stepping aside so I could enter. The house smelled faintly of old books and cedar. Adrian led me to the living room, where jazz played softly on a record player. "You like Coltrane?" he asked. "Yeah," I lied. I didn't really listen to jazz, but I liked the way the music filled the silence. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to me. "To unexpected meetings," he said, raising his glass. I hesitated, then clinked mine against his. We talked for hours, about his life in New York, about his work in the gallery, about the way he felt trapped by too many people and not enough space. And then, somehow, the conversation turned. "You know," he said, staring into his glass, "I was engaged once." I blinked. "Really?" He nodded, his jaw tightening. "Her name was Claire. We were almost perfect, until we weren't." "What happened?" "She left," he said simply. There was so much pain in those 2 words that I didn't push further. When I finally stood to leave, it was late. Adrian walked me to the door. "Danny," he said, his voice low, "you don't have to keep mowing the lawn just to see me." The words landed like a stone in my chest. I didn't know what to say. That night I couldn't sleep, because somewhere deep down I realized he was right. I wasn't mowing Mr. Henderson's lawn anymore. I was showing up for him. But there was something I hadn't told anyone. The next time I arrived, I saw it. Through the window, just for a split second, Adrian was on the phone. His voice was sharp, almost angry, and he turned his back as if to hide what he was saying. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw his face in the reflection of the glass. Cold, different, like the Adrian I'd been talking to wasn't the only version of him. Like there were parts of him I hadn't met yet. Parts one wasn't sure I wanted to. The next week, I almost didn't go back. Something about the way Adrian had looked in that window, the sharpness in his expression. It unsettled me. But curiosity, maybe even something closer to longing, pulled me back to that house anyway. When I arrived, he was already waiting outside. "Thought maybe you'd stopped coming," he said with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I thought about it," I admitted. "And yet," he said softly, "you're here." That day, we didn't talk much while I worked. He just watched me quietly, leaning against the porch rail. When I finished, he didn't invite me in this time. He just asked, "Drive with me?" I hesitated, then nodded. We got into his car, and without saying where we were going, he drove out of town. The silence between us was heavy but not uncomfortable, just full of something unspoken. After about 20 minutes, we stopped by the lake. The water was still, the surface mirroring the dusky sky. Adrian got out first, hands in his pockets, staring at the horizon. "This was my escape when I was younger," he said quietly. "Whenever things at home got too loud, I stood beside him. Too loud." He looked at me, his eyes shadowed. My father was strict, angry, the kind of man who thought pain made you stronger. There was a crack in his voice he didn't bother to hide. Something in me softened then. Whatever walls I'd felt around him, they weren't just for protection. They were made of old wounds. As we stood there, he said, almost under his breath, "You make it easier to breathe, Danny." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. But my chest felt tight, like I was standing on the edge of something, unsure if I should step forward or run back. In the weeks that followed, we got closer, closer than I ever meant to. Sometimes, when Mr. Henderson wasn't home, Adrian would call me over. We'd talk for hours, laugh, drink whiskey, share pieces of our past. But every so often, there'd be that look again, the one I'd seen in the window. Cold, guarded, like a storm waiting just beyond the surface. And one night, I found out why. It was late. I had just finished the lawn, and Adrian had asked me in for just one drink. But when I stepped into the house, I heard voices, raised voices. Adrian was in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, his face pale with anger. "No," he snapped. "I told you, don't call me here. Don't." He turned and saw me. For a moment, the mask slipped completely. His expression was raw, dark, almost desperate. He hung up without saying goodbye. "Who was that?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer at first. He just stared at me, breathing hard, like he was deciding whether or not to let me in or push me away completely. Finally, he said, "Claire." The name hit like a stone in still water. "The fiancée?" He nodded once. "She doesn't let go easily." That night, Adrian told me the truth, or at least some of it. How they'd been together for years, how the engagement had fallen apart, and how she still called, still texted, still told him she wasn't done with him. "Do you still love her?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked away. "I don't know what I feel," he admitted, "but I know I feel something when you're here, and I don't want that to stop." I should have walked away then. Every instinct told me this was a storm I couldn't weather. But I stayed, because part of me already cared too much. The end came quietly, not with a fight, not with a confession, but with a goodbye. It was a rainy afternoon when Adrian told me he was leaving. "My uncle doesn't need me here anymore," he said, standing on the porch, rain dripping from his hair. "And I think I've stayed too long already." There was nothing I could say. I just nodded, my throat tight. He looked at me for a long moment, like he wanted to memorize my face. "You were a light I didn't expect," he said finally. "Maybe even one I didn't deserve." And then he was gone. Weeks passed. The lawn grew wild again. Mr. Henderson asked me to keep mowing, but the house felt empty, like it had lost its center. And I thought about Adrian, about the way he asked me that first question, "Are you single right now?" About the way he made me feel seen, and the way he left, and the storm he carried inside him. Sometimes when I pass that lake, I stop. I think about that evening by the water, about the quiet weight of his words. "You make it easier to breathe." And I wonder if he found someone else who makes breathing easier now. Or if maybe, just maybe, he still thinks of me too. Life has a way of giving you people who don't stay forever, but stay long enough to change you. Adrian changed me, and though I may never see him again, every time I hear Coltrane on a quiet night or smell rain on cedar wood, I remember, some loves don't need to last to leave something behind. Some loves don't break you, they just leave you a little bit more awake.